In my last video I mentioned the first use of this new behemoth, one that absolutely scared the Germans into submission on the Somme. Not really, but it sounds cool. And it has been featured on this channel once already. I'm of course talking about World War I tanks. Now, I'm not going to go into great depth because I've already talked about these tanks before, but the main tanks of World War I, was the British Mark 1, 4 and 5, all of which featured the rhomboid design. The Mark 1 was ultimately the worst. The Mark 4 improved on the Mark 1 and it was the most produced, and the Mark 5 was the final evolution. Now, the British did evolve the Mark V into the Mark V Star and the Mark V Star for the Germans' response to tanks, which was widening the trenches. They did also make Mark 8s and 9s, which didn't really see use. And they did make the Whippet tank, which is one I didn't mention. Now, the Whippet tank was essentially the medium tank of World War I for the British. It featured only machine guns, and it could do a maximum of astonishing 8 kilometers an hour. Or is it 8 miles an hour? I think it's 8 miles an hour. Obviously, the Germans responded with capturing British tanks, then repainting them and then sending them out to the field. But their own design was one that's really it's still iconic in the eyes of Germans today, but it's iconic in historians, and that is the A7V Sturmpanzerwagen, or the Moving Fortress. This was the only German-made tank, and not even 20 were built. Well, 20 were built, but they ordered 100. But only 20 were built. Now, the French got to get involved in something. So they made the Schneider CA, the Saint-Chamond, which then turned into a self-propelled gun, and the FT-17 Renault, which influenced tank designs from its creation in 1916 all the way up to today. It featured the first 360 turret, outside tracks, a separate engine from the compartment. It was everything. Now, the Russians did experiment with tanks, and they actually made the Tsar tank. It had 2 massive wheels, 1 miniature back wheel, and then 1 compartment in the middle which housed all the guns. Obviously it bogged down in testing, and then they just said, "I'll sod it," and then just scrapped it. So as I say, I have done these tanks before on my channel. I will leave links to them in the description below. But let me know what you think on World War I tanks, and I will see you next time for Russia's answer to the Battle of Verdun.